Recording. Okay. Okay, Paul, welcome.
Thank you.
Really excited to have you here to talk about your book, which I did read, and I read it really fast, by the way. I thought it was a really great read and, easy. It flowed and it was easy to read. So it was
Thank
fun.
you.
It definitely gave me some new insights into you and who you were and the
That's what
things
my
that
sister said.
yeah, things that you've gone through and the things that you've done in your life. So, whenever I saw it and read it, and I thought, well, this would be a great way, because one of the ideas I had for Greens Point and the newsletter and the website, and again, another way to engage people is to showcase and teach people and help people learn a little bit more about each other. And
Sure.
given that you've done this, then this is a great opportunity. So we're going to talk about, I put together some questions. We're going to talk about your book, Undercover in India, which you wrote at when?
I started in 2012, like
Okay.
making notes, and putting together, I had a big stack of yellow pads and I just started writing everything I could think of.
I was always, as I read through it, amazed at the level of specificity and detail that you had in remembering stories from so long ago.
Yeah, my memory I guess it's good. I mean, I never realized that, because just like everybody else, I can't remember where I put something and this and that. I never thought of my memory as being particularly good, but I did, find it very easy to remember all those stories in some detail, so.
And so you had your big pile of, I think you said about 1,500 pages
Yeah.
of notes. How did you pull it together? How did you condense it and then come up with what resulted in about 250-page ebook?
I learned this from there was a radio psychologist, David Viscott, his name was, and I used to listen to him, and he said, you know how I write my books? I just write down everything I can think of, and then I have somebody type it up for me, and then I just put it all in order.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, I took all those notes and dictated them using voice dictation into the computer under like categories.
Mm-hmm.
And, according to the story, well, this is story, obviously it was in India. This
Mm-hmm.
story was in Philadelphia. This story was back in Jersey. So I did it that way. And then I started looking at the chronology of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think if I would have started with the chronology, if I would have started saying, okay, I'm going to start in 1970 when I first learned meditation and go from, I never could have done it. I think it would have been too overwhelming. But since I had all this like raw material, it was just a matter of filling in the spaces and then teaching for a few years.
And so your story kind of started in when you were in San Francisco, a hippie, that hate Ashbury that whole time in the 60s, really, right? Late 60s, and the craziness that was going on there. Before that, though, you grew up in New Jersey, right?
Yes. Actually, just to give you a little background, originally there was one book starting when I was 4 years old up until the end of the India book.
Mm-hmm.
And it just got to be too much. It was like 500-600 pages.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think, and there was a distinct break in the middle when I sort of quit smoking pot and everything and started getting interested in meditation. And that's where the second book starts. But there is another book that's going to come out in about 6 months.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So we have something to look forward to. And that's the earlier days.
Earlier, yeah. It's also chronological. It starts when I was 4 years old in summer camp and goes up till I go to San Francisco in 1969 with my friend, and we go to in the Haight-Ashbury area, and we go to all the like Woodstock and Altamont and see all the rock stuff. And, so I write it and all the drugs and everything. And I write it. That's the first book. And it ends when I quit that lifestyle. I just decide I need a big change.
And have you named that new book yet, or is that still?
I have a working title, and I think it's going to be called Jersey Journal San Francisco Serenade.
Cool.
And I think the subtitle is something like Surviving the Drug World of the 60s or something.
Cool. Well, we'll look forward to that. Yeah. So I'm going to go over to the questions that I sent you ahead of time. let's see, what makes the the first one, well, I'll just go down the list. So I one of the questions I said was, what's the biggest life lesson from this time, from the 60s and then through the time in India? What was your biggest life lesson, as you went through that really cool experience?
Yeah, I think it was a major change of lifestyle for me. And like I said, when I first met that first yogi in Mendocino, I went to his retreat up in the Mendocino, and that was a big shift for me. That was the first time I kind of had this dream of getting enlightenment, and all of a sudden I met this person, and it was just like a major shift. And so I started cleaning out my lifestyle. I became vegetarian. I started doing meditation, yoga, and I think that was really a huge shift for me. So I went from being sort of like this outlaw type guy and rebel, into being this like spiritual guy,
Mhm.
and it was a big transformation for me, and also in my relationship to my family, because I'd always been considered like kind of like the bad, not the
The
bad,
black sheep,
but
there's always one of those in the family, right? The
what was it? What was
black
it?
sheep of the family.
Yeah, I was the black sheep. Yeah. So, but I mean, they didn't hate on me, but I was always like looked at a little bit off key or something, But once I learned meditation, and I saw myself that way,
Mhm.
to some extent. And then when I got into meditation and everything, it was like all of a sudden I was like, well, they don't know anything about this. So now I'm up here and they're down here.
Mhm.
So that really helped my self-esteem and everything. And once I went to India, I was on a whole other plane. I was just like out there somewhere. Like I
Yeah,
was.
and that, I mean, the whole experience and the way you lived, and I think I put a question, yeah, I did. I asked you, it seems like it was a really austere life, and you were, really living a hard life to some degree, right? I mean, you didn't have a lot of comforts. I don't know. It seemed like there was food, but certainly not gourmet food or
Right, right.
so
Well,
what was it like? Um, when you were going through a lot and living like that, and what did it teach you?
um, like when you're living day by day in a situation like that, you're not thinking about like what lessons am I learning here? Like that comes many years later,
Right.
But for me, it was just like I was doing this unique stuff, and I was just like breaking with everything I'd ever been taught to do, like
Mhm.
sleeping on a cement floor on a single blanket, you know, eating with your hands, being a vegetarian. There's no toilets, in some places. I mean, I was 23, so it was like an adventure.
You're
I
right.
was accumulating adventures that I know nobody I knew, nobody I grew up with had. So to me, it was like a fun thing.
And
More
when
like,
you were in those environments, I mean, were there other Americans around, and how'd you communicate?
there are other Americans around. I would say most of the monks spoke pretty good English. Like a lot
Mm,
of them were college students who dropped out and became monks. And
mhm.
I would say most people I met in India spoke pretty good English. So communication wasn't that much a problem. And there was like maybe in our guest house in that first town, there was like maybe a dozen foreigners, like a couple Europeans, maybe a couple Filipinos, because the group kind of that monk that I learned from, he went to the Philippines first for a couple of years. So
Mhm.
for some reason, there was a bunch of Filipinos, there was a few Europeans, a couple of guys from Germany, and a lot of them stayed for like 2 weeks and went home. But I stayed for a year. So
So you were there a year the first time, a full year, right? And then when you went back, you were there for,
about 4 months, 3, 4 months.
okay. And
During
that was when you were undercover and playing the tourist, right? And trying to
Right,
help
right. Yeah, that was when I went in that monastery, and we had to sneak out in the middle of the night to
Mhm.
avoid getting arrested.
Yeah, it must have been scary.
I don't know. I was never very scared in India. I was always like thinking I was a little bigger than the place. Like being an American, you feel a little superior.
Hmm.
Policemen, Indian policemen are like, they're like security guards compared to American policemen. They're, they're scared of you, you know. So I just figured I could get out of there. I mean, it just never occurred to me that I would really wind up in jail for a long time, because some people did for
Right.
like
Yeah.
4 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the scary part. I mean, you hear about it nowadays in, places like Russia and, where for no reason or for made up reasons, you just never know,
Yeah.
we're used to our liberties. And yeah, that would be the part that I would worry about.
Yeah. I mean, even though like when you get older, you worry more about I would never do any of that stuff now. I
Well, that
mean,
was like, when I was young, I don't know if I ever told you this story. When I was 19 in the army, my first husband and I drove to Panama. Oh,
yeah.
it's like I think about it nowadays, it's like there's be no way I'd ever try that, but we were young and dumb and we were like, yeah, why not?
Yeah, I mean, to be a woman and have to go through basic training and all that, that would be beyond my fear level, but I don't know. I was
living in India, not so much. So let's go back to your time in San Francisco, when you first started with meditation and all that and decided to quit drugs. You said that you were tired of that whole scene, but was there one specific thing that made
yeah.
it happen, or was it just kind of an accumulation of, oh, I just need to change my life?
It's funny. This is like the third time I've been interviewed, and every time we go out of this book into one of the other books, to grab a story. So what happened was I was living in San Francisco, and I was basically selling hashish for a living, and some guys that I knew got arrested with 50 kilograms of marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
They were pretty big dealers, and they they tried to escape. They kind of got set up, by some narcotic squad or something, and they slammed the garage door on somebody's hand. So now they're in real trouble. Right?
Mm-hmm.
They sort of like assaulting a police officer. In addition, even in those days, like it's worse. So they got arrested, and they had to spend all their money bailing themselves out. And then when they got out, our mutual friend, who was also a very big dealer in San Francisco, she said, come on over. They're going to tell us what happened and the whole story. And we'll have she called it a coming out party. So we went over there. And while we were there, these guys were telling us a story, and they were all, I had quit drugs already. So they were all smoking joints and everything. And all of a sudden, all these police started jumping in the windows.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And so they were set up again because the police want to get as much against them as they could for slamming the garage door. That was the big deal to them, on the cop's hand. I guess he broke a hand. And also they were talking about they couldn't afford to get arrested again, and they were talking about maybe buying guns or something, And I'm like, oh my God, I was like this, like peace and love, baby. So we all went off in the paddy wagon to jail and spent the night in jail. And the lady, like I said, she had people, and they said they were going to take care of all the legal expenses, and we didn't have to worry about anything. And but that was the point. I said, that's it for me. I'm going to find a new lifestyle. Because when I first started getting into like smoking pot and even LSD, it was more about self-discovery, the Timothy Leary lines and everything. So, but now I could see where this is not going to end well.
Right.
I mean, I was never going to get guns or anything, but knowing people like that, being around people like that, I got to change the channel here,
Right. Right.
This is just not what I'm about.
What you want to be for your
Right.
life.
So I said,
Yeah.
well, I'm going to take some yoga classes. And that's sort of where the second book starts. But the end of the first book is where I make that decision, or the first book that's not printed yet.
Right. So let's talk about that yoga and meditation. I mean, I'm a yogi, so I totally get that, but I've never really done meditation, and I find I have a hard time just keeping my mind still. So how did you get into that, and what is it, how does it make you feel? What does it do for you?
Meditation, at this point, it's been like 53 years that I've been meditating every day, never missed a day, twice. Like I meditate when I wake up in the morning. These days, because I'm older, you wake up at night.
Yes.
I don't know if you've reached that phase yet.
Oh, yeah.
I know you're at least one generation behind me, that in age, maybe more. So I'll just sit up at like 4 a.m. and meditate for 45 minutes,
Mhm.
and then I sleep like a rock, for the next few hours. But so what I was trying to say is I don't really know exactly what it has done to me because it's so ingrained
Part of who you
in my
are.
personality by now. But it's very relaxing, and it gives a lot of feeling of peace. It helps you focus, like you become very concentrated, you become tenacious.
Mhm.
And there's a Sanskrit word, I don't remember, I think I used it in one of the books, but viveka, it means discrimination. It means being able to decide things.
Mhm.
It'll help you in the long run. So meditation over the long term will do something like that. Like, in other words, like I can make a decision without exactly knowing what all the information. And it turns out, oh, that turned out pretty well.
Mhm.
I'm not blocked so much by passion and, those kind of things. So I think that's what it does. I mean,
Kind of
I
freeing.
suppose everybody has a different take on that, but that's mine. And, it's something now that I've done so much that it's not that hard. When people say, "Oh, I'm really stressed out and I can't concentrate, I want to meditate," usually what they mean is they want to be instantly cured of that. They don't really want to meditate. They just don't want to be stressed.
Right.
So what I tell them is, whenever you want to be like more free from stress, start 25 years earlier.
Yeah.
If it's
That's
not
so
instant,
hard. So
yeah.
it's like for a novice that says, "Okay, I think it can help me. I want to start." How would you start? What would you do?
Um, like I don't teach people meditation, but there's a lot of like, I sort of like Buddhism these days, like
Mhm.
my old group, it still exists, but there's so much baggage with it as far as like what they want you to do and how they want you to behave. But the Buddhists, see, they're very mellow. Like
Mhm.
there's one in Lake Worth here that I used to go to, and I would go every Wednesday night before COVID and just sit and they talk a little bit, to relax you or something, and then you meditate or chant or whatever, and they tell you how to do it, and it's really like not trying to completely clear your mind, but it's about like focusing on something very positive, like
Mhm.
some kind of cosmic thing. So
Cool.
I would suggest if you're interested in learning meditation, find some Buddhists.
Mhm.
There's different kinds. There's like Tibetan Buddhists, Myanmar Buddhists, India Buddhists. Just sort your way through them and see what works for you.
Mhm. Yeah, I had a friend years ago who was Buddhist, and I remember going to his house sometimes, and he kind of had his little temple thing, and he would be sitting and meditating. And
Yeah, they have atmospherics, which is good. You know,
yeah.
and
Oh,
also they don't bother you. They don't want money. They don't ask you if you are you committed or anything like that. You just go.
yeah. Right.
That's why I like them now.
Cool. You said in the book that you often felt like you didn't fit in. So, now after years of, practicing, the lifestyle that you live, do you think you found kind of your place? And was there some certain thing that made it happen, or are you still in search of something that makes you feel
Well,
a part of something?
to be honest, out of all your questions, that was the only one I don't remember ever saying that. I might have said it in some form, but I don't recall it because I was always very social, always had a lot of friends. So I wasn't like this like alienated loner, but I was alienated in a sense from mainstream society. Like I just, you know, I talked about that a lot more in the other book, but you know, I guess I was more of a free thinker, like an iconoclast, you know, and I sort of came to a realization even almost before I started, you know, smoking pot and became a hippie and all that, that it was okay to be different. Like I didn't want to be like all these people, you know. They were just, you know, there wasn't enough going on in their lives to interest me, and I knew I would live outside the mainstream, but it wasn't really like a, you know, like a James Dean thing or something where I felt like an alienated loner that hated everyone. I was a very social guy, even growing up. You know, I was in with all the different crowds and, you know, fairly popular. It just was never a problem getting along with people, except for some adults.
Great. I know we have limited time, and I don't want to make this super long just because, you know, I want to make it so that people want to watch the whole thing. So I asked in essence most of the questions, but two more. So, you know, you talked in the book about you never wanted to get married, and you know, you obviously took a very unique path than the traditional, you know, go to college, get married, have 2 kids and a dog.
Right.
Is there anything that you've regretted of the choices that you made or would have done differently?
Well, I always see people ask a question, what would you do if you could live life over again? They say, oh, I would do it exactly the same. I would do everything different. You know, I already did this. I would like to see what else I could do. You know, what else would happen? Regrets, you know, it's a funny thing. I don't know what would have happened if I lived some other way. I mean, some part of me, like I grew up with learning problems, like in school, so I couldn't achieve anything. You know, although they said I was very intelligent, I couldn't achieve, like some of the kids I knew weren't smarter than me. I couldn't achieve, they were going, you know, to Harvard and Yale, and I was like getting C's and D's, you know. So that was very frustrating for me. But if I knew what I knew now, I would know how to learn. You know, like I figured out that I need to learn by myself. Like if you just tell me things, that's not going to do it. But if I write notes, if I read, you know, I can get the information I need. So I think that whole thing would have been a regret that I didn't have better support, you know.
Well, and I think back in those days, you know, we didn't know as much about learning, and, you know, the learning environments were set to the standard. And if you were outside of that, then you just kind of got left by the wayside, right?
Yeah, I was an inconvenient learner. And even they didn't want you to ask too many questions. There was like 25, 30 kids in the class. Like they just didn't really have time to deal with an individual. And I just needed a different type of learning pattern, you know. So that would be a big thing for me. You know, I think I made some fairly good choices considering what I had to work with.
Yeah. Okay, last question. What's next? I mean, you said you were working on the other book, and I know you've, in conversations I've had with you, you've talked about going to Hawaii, but I mean, you know, you still have a lot of life left. So what's the rest of your life look like?
That's another big thing I've been thinking about, like since my mother passed away, you know, like I took care of her for like 13 years. And then when she passed away, I mean, when I first came here, I thought I'll just stay with her and then go back to Hawaii. But having been here so long and having this house to deal with, I don't know what to do, you know. And but I believe that at the right time, I'll figure it out. Like basically, that's all I can do with it, you know. It'd be great if I had a really clear idea of what I want to do, but it's not quite there yet. But it's not a bad problem. It's just something to solve. You know, I mean, I got a nice big house to live in. I've got everything's going good. The book got published. My artwork is like piled up everywhere. I mean, I have a lot of potential, but I'm
Yes.
just not sure what direction it's going to take. And I'm kind of waiting for some like voice to come out of the universe somewhere and tell me
Right.
this you should do. But so far, not
Well,
yet.
but I think if you stay just open to possibilities and change,
Yeah,
then, and I've always been a firm believer of, what's meant to be is going to be, and somehow you go where you're supposed to go.
right, right. But like I said, it's not a bad problem. It's just like we'll see what happens.
Great. Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for taking the time. I will share the recording obviously with you, and we'll help you get it posted and out there. And again, the name of the book is Undercover, right?
Oh, here is the cover.
Undercover in India. And we have the link on our website, and obviously you do as on yours, and hopefully you'll get lots of more interest and readership.
I hope so. Well, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it, Sharon.